Michigan beats Alabama 27-20 in said overtime. Very, I guess this is about probably what we expected. Like mostly a defensive game, um, running the ball a lot. Jalen Milroe had to run the ball for Alabama to. Well, okay, they also were able to run a little bit with the running backs, but he was not able to pass a lot. Put it that way. And Michigan, they got enough. They had some. Obviously, one of the big stories was a lot of special teams miscues by the Michigan team, but
Yeah.
they were able to do enough. And I guess my big takeaway was they are as advertised in the line of scrimmage. Like they kicked Bama's butt up front for the majority of the game, not the whole game, but for the majority of the game, they controlled it up front.
Especially in the first half.
Yeah.
Like when Michigan was bringing pressure, and they didn't always have to blitz, but especially when if anytime Michigan blitzed a linebacker in the first half, the said linebacker had a free run at the quarterback.
Yeah.
That happened a lot in the first half. So yeah, credit to Michigan. Alabama did a really good job, I felt, of adjusting out of that later. And I actually felt that Alabama in the third quarter and some of the fourth quarter was pushing Michigan around a bit. They got the running game established definitely in the third quarter and was moving the ball that way. But yeah, and they did do a little bit better job in pass pro, but honestly, Alabama just didn't pass much. Like they just really didn't throw the ball much at all. They were not effective throwing. Both defenses I felt were really good. Like just go ahead and give both teams some credit there. I felt both defenses did a really good job overall, and kind of was able to keep this one low scoring. I know it did hit the over. The over did hit. That's only because they went to overtime because there was nothing in the 60 minutes that would have gotten them over. So yeah, really good game, really entertaining. Did you give JJ McCarthy any shot on that last drive to go down and tie it up before overtime? Any at all?
I did, but mostly not as much because of him, but I honestly, they had been trying to run the ball the whole game, doing a better job of it in the first half than the third quarter, especially that Bama was stopping their run game. But I don't know that I really thought they were going to do it, but I felt like with that offensive line, with Blake Corum, and JJ McCarthy, like I thought they had a shot. I thought maybe at that point they had leaned on him enough that Alabama's defense would bend just enough that they could do it. And we saw it especially in overtime. I mean, what was that? You're right. Alabama's defense played well for the majority of the game. It did feel like maybe they wore out a little bit at the end.
Yes.
Impressive job by Michigan to go get that score for sure. Because it did feel like to me, like I kind of agree, I think, with what you're maybe suggesting with the question, in that it sort of felt like Alabama had the game won. But it was never completely felt that way, but it did sort of feel like Alabama had the game finally figured out. They finally won it, even though I didn't really feel Alabama was like the better team, really.
So when on the first pass of the game, Michigan gets the ball, right? And the first pass of the game, McCarthy is attempting to possibly throw it out of bounds, maybe, and got really lucky that Caleb Downs just happened to tap his heel out of bounds before he got back in bounds for the pick. He got, just completely bailed out there. And at that moment, I was like, this is why Harbaugh is 0-2 in the playoff. Like, he lost to the TCU team who got smoked by Georgia, and then he got smoked by Georgia the year before that. He has not been very good in the playoff. And it's like, they're doing it again. They're falling apart. And to their credit, they were able to hang in there after that. They had a really strong first half, and they trailed through for most of the second half. They were down, but they were down 7, man, and a huge drive to get into overtime. The fourth down call, the 4th and 2, the play call, I thought was really good. There were actually people out there that said Michigan should have punted the ball in a defensive, like, if you punt the ball, the game's over. Like, you cannot punt that football. Keep it. Yeah, go for it. If you can't get 2 yards, you're not going to be able to go down the field and score anyway. Like, you might as well just go ahead and give up. And I thought they had a really nice play call. It was a big pass to Corum out there in the flat, and yeah, it was impressive. The one catch by Roman Wilson I thought was wild. I thought he had a
Yes.
really nice catch there 2 plays later after that fourth down conversion to get them inside, I think, the 10-yard line, and they scored not long after.
On a tipped pass, then like I don't think I've ever seen a pass that was tipped that just it kept its nice spiral and just went up a little higher, and he just
Mm-hmm.
climbs the ladder and comes down with it. But what you were saying on the fourth down play, I'm just tired. Like, can we be done with announcers talking about the risk of going for it on 4th and 1 or whatever when
Yeah.
giving the other team the ball is inherently risky too? Like giving like a punt guarantees the other team has the ball. That's also risky. Everything you do on a football field has some element of risk. That is, yeah, I'm just done with that whole thing. Anyway, props to Michigan. Uh, yes, they were down in the fourth quarter, but didn't it feel like they were the better team? Like, didn't it? Okay, they won the yards per play battle 5.9 to 4.4. Like,
Yep.
didn't it just kind of feel like if Alabama pulls this off, it's mostly because of some turnovers and like a better kicker, quite frankly, and just I don't know, like pulling a rabbit out of a hat to some extent, because I never really felt like Alabama was actually the better team in this game.
I think the special teams is a very interesting point that you make. Like the missed PAT early on for Michigan was like
Huge.
disaster. It was
Yeah.
like there's no chance they'll need that later on. Like you could say that when it happens, like this is awful. Like they're going to desperately need that 1 point. Turns out they went to overtime with it, but yeah, that's neither here nor there. So the the missed field goal for Michigan was big. Alabama's special teams were really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, it could have been way worse for Michigan in the special teams department. They did have the one muffed punt. That second muffed punt at the
Oh,
1 yard line that they recovered, and it was fine because he was able to get it out to the one and they could take knees. But if he muffs that punt at the 5 where he did and it rolls into the end zone, that's a safety. That is 2 points and the ball for Bama. The game is over.
yeah.
He probably, I don't know if he would have kicked it out the back of the end zone just to give a touchback, maybe. No, that's a safety too.
That's the
Yeah,
safety.
he
Yeah.
he wouldn't have had any real chance to get out. So yeah, it could have been so much worse for Michigan. And hey, credit to him for, I think they even mentioned it on the broadcast. He was able to keep his wits about him and pick the ball up and recover it and get it at least to the one. So it wasn't just just an absolute disaster there, and they were able to end it. The point about Michigan being the better team throughout is, I believe, true. I think Michigan, through over the course of the game, was the better football team. They definitely hit periods where they looked very sketchy. Like
Yes, the third
Michigan,
quarter especially.
well, that and like the first drive, and just really anytime they were on special teams at all,
Yeah.
they struggled. Like they struggled in some aspects of the game. They were not good on third down. They were 2 for 2 on fourth down. But yeah, neither team actually was any good on third down. So yeah, they outrushed. Well, no, they didn't actually have more rushing yards, but they had more yards per rush than Alabama did. And I think that's a credit to Michigan's front seven. So two really good teams. Can I just make one point, and not to keep going over this point? I've made it previously, but like we left Florida State out because we were absolutely certain that they would not be able to throw the ball with their third string quarterback. And you know what? We put Alabama in because we thought they would. And Alabama had 116 yards passing, and it's a good Michigan defense. It is, but there's a lot of teams that could get more than 116 yards passing against this Michigan defense.
I agree completely. And a lot of people are saying, well, this justifies the committee's decision. Florida State lost by 60 to Georgia, and this game went to overtime. Like, could you ask for a better matchup? Well, if this was an old classic Alabama team of the last 15 years, they probably win this game because this is the worst quarterback they've had in 15 years. I think Jake Coker passes for more than 116 yards in this game. Like, I don't know. Like, Alabama might be a better team than Florida State. They might be. Like, I'm saying without Jordan Travis. They might
Mm-hmm.
be. I don't
Right.
know that definitively to be true. And yeah, I kind of would have liked to see undefeated Florida State with Tate Rodemaker in the playoff. Now, they wouldn't have won it, and we got two great games.
Sure.
It's fine. We'll be fine.
Yeah.
But your point is well stated. We left out the team with the starting quarterback who was injured for the team who threw 416 passing yards.
Mm-hmm. We also, one thing to note too, in the playoff this year, there were two teams that were undefeated and two teams with one loss, and the undefeated teams won. And maybe there is something to be able to win a lot of close games. I think that going into the Texas game, and we'll get to Washington, Texas more in a bit, but Washington actually was very comparable to Florida State. Going up, like their resume leading up into it, right? Like Washington had a really tough month where Penix was not completely healthy. And I think, I don't know. It's we do have to let the Florida State stuff go at some point. Neither of us, by the way, are Florida State fans. We don't care. I'm not an ACC guy. I like the SEC actually. Like I should be, the pro Alabama guy, but it's just funny. They threw for 116 yards. Of course they did. And ultimately the reason why they couldn't score down in the red zone in overtime is because they didn't really have any threat to throw. Like everyone knew they were going to run the ball, and that included Michigan's front seven, and they stopped it.
I am usually like Mr. Throw the ball. To me, I wanted Alabama to just hand the ball off more and more. Like you can run like zone read stuff, like maybe Milroe keeps it on the zone read, but like I wanted them to throw the ball maybe 25% of the time. And I know it's hard to play offense that way. I don't know, man. Like 20 points is probably just not going to cut it. And they still had a chance in overtime, but I was a little disappointed just by the whole offensive game plan, I guess, for Alabama. And I know, it's not like they tried to throw the ball that often. It just felt like almost felt like a win for Michigan every time they actually did drop back.
Well, and I was going to say too, Alabama's running backs, and it was mainly just Jason McClellan and Justice Haynes, were really, really good when they got the ball. They did not get very many carries. They only had 18 carries combined between the running backs. Milroe had 21. Like Milroe carried the ball all the time, but McClellan had more yards than Blake Corum did on 5 less carries. He also had 2 touchdowns, including the 34-yarder to start it off. So I felt both running backs really in the third quarter were really clicking, and then Alabama kind of got away from it. And I'm with you. They should have ran the ball maybe less with Milroe, more with the backs, using Milroe as kind of like you said, a zone, like read a guy, read the defensive end. If he crashes down, keep it. You're allowed to keep it, but have your running backs be the first read and make them stop that first. So we're kind of nitpicking, and we're also kind of playing the results too, maybe a little bit. That said, this game was in overtime. And really, if Roman Wilson doesn't make an incredible catch, Caleb Downs is picking that ball off. On that tipped pass that we talked about. The game's over anyway. So, Alabama had a lot of chances to win this. They didn't, and Michigan gets it done. This is big for Harbaugh. I think this changes a lot of maybe what's left of the narrative, because I think the narrative is slowly dissipating. But he needed a playoff win, and make no mistake, if he would have lost this game, which it was a close game, obviously overtime, if he would have lost this football game, he's 0-3 in the playoffs, and people would have said that he cannot do that. He can't win in the playoffs. He's not meant for that. And that's why a lot of the public was picking Alabama. A lot of the money was bet on Alabama. And you saw that line. Vegas kept that line pro Michigan. I thought that was interesting. That line stayed at Michigan, even with most of the money on Bama. That line stayed Michigan 1.5 up to 2, 2.5 at one point there right before kick. So, I thought it was a really good game, very entertaining. Rose Bowl it's a great TV show. The Rose Bowl is a fantastic TV show. It was a lot of fun. Really, really good game.
If we're picking nits just in this section a little bit, is it okay that I wanted just a little bit more out of McCarthy? Like I wanted a few more of the throws that he missed. Is that unfair?
The one that he had two. There was one where he overthrew a man on the sideline and just wildly overthrew him.
Mhm.
And it was on he missed him by like 5 yards. Like it wasn't close. And it was like, oof, like, okay, that's not great. And then I think they had like a 3rd and 7, and they would have picked it up on a crossing route, but he threw behind him. And the
Mhm.
receiver, as he was turning for it, like fell down 2 yards short. And it was like, ooh, if that's on target, that's at least another 10 yards, you know? Like there
Yeah.
was a couple of things like that where he missed it. But his overall stat line, the man had 3 touchdowns. As careless as it felt like he did not throw an interception.
Right.
He was 17 for 20, 17 completions on 27 attempts, 221 yards. He was he was actually pretty good. Like
Mhm.
he threw for 3 TDs. I don't know. He was good in the red zone too, which I think Michigan definitely struggled with that last year against TCU in the playoff game. They had they just full on melted down inside the 5 yard line a couple of times. And the play calling I felt was really, they got guys open. They got guys open on the edges. And McCarthy was for the most part throwing to wide open dudes for the touchdowns. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's so he was good. He was definitely, they needed McCarthy. They could not have won with Cade McNamara. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like McCarthy did give them that. And we didn't see much from McCarthy in the run game. Anything on that at all? McCarthy really didn't run the ball.
Yeah, I was maybe a little bit surprised by that because he does it's not like he runs a lot, but he does
Right.
bring that aspect. He is capable of that. I don't know, is that something you're saving for Washington? I don't know that you would save anything in this game. It's
No.
possible they just didn't think they could beat the Alabama linebackers who are really fast and really big, strong humans. And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe this wasn't the matchup for him to do that. I don't know. I'm with you. I think you can at the same time say that McCarthy played well, and also it would have been nice for Michigan if he had been able to be just slightly more consistent in a few spots. But again, we're kind of nitpicking, and that's probably a little bit unfair.
The final stat I'll give, and we can move on to the next game after this, but tackles for loss, like that critical department, the tackle for loss
Yes.
department, Michigan had 10 tackles for loss. Alabama had one.
Yeah.
I mean, game over. Like kind of like that's kind of the game right there. And the 6 sacks to just one for Alabama. So yeah, full credit to them. That was I think Michigan has the best defensive line in the country.
Yes.
At times, you could say Florida State would rival it. I wouldn't have a problem if you went with Florida State's defensive line, especially there at the end with Verse and Pat Payton, some of those guys. I wouldn't have a problem with that either. But Michigan has a lot of depth. I was really impressed with just the multiple guys that they would keep throwing at you
Mhm.
and getting tackles for loss. I thought it was really impressive.
Yeah, it's not just one or two guys. And credit here on Bud Elliott. He's been on this all season long. He's been saying that the guys that everyone thinks Georgia has on the defensive line, Michigan actually has those guys this year. Your Kenneth
Yeah,
Grants and your Chris Jenkins, and like those guys are just really good.
right.
And they showed up and showed out. Real quick, one last thing on this game for me. It's been, everyone was giving Tommy Reese all of the crap on the last play call and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah,
And then you had other people saying, well, actually, there's a bad snap, and it looks like some people were saying it was actually an RPO, like it's supposed to be a swing pass to the running back. Other people said it was supposed to be a quarterback run, but if he gets the snap cleanly, then he walks into the end zone basically because it's a little quicker.
right.
What were your thoughts on, well, first of all, the play call? And you mentioned we don't want to just play the results, but did you like the play call? What did you think the play call was? And yeah, what are your thoughts on the way that was handled by
I
both?
am
Yeah, sorry.
well. I am never a fan of taking all the reads out of the game. I'm not.
Yeah.
I like to at least give him one read. And I hear the thing about the swing pass. That was not an option on that play. You will never be able to convince me that the swing pass was actually a call that they had on, because that was immediately take the ball and dash up the middle. Like that was a called run, in my opinion. I would have liked him to get Milrow on the edge. If you're going to run him, at least do something with a fake jet sweep one way and run him out the other way. You can still throw off of that. You know what I mean? Like you have options there. Something to get the linebackers thinking. This one here, there was no thought involved. This was just crash down,
Yeah.
and which they did to great effect. So yeah, I would not have run at Michigan's best group which is their defensive front. I would not have done that. I would try to get Milroe. If we are going to run him, we're going to get him on the edge.
And if there's anything Bama should do in the offseason, it's find a center who can snap the ball to the quarterback.
It's been a problem all year.
Yeah.
And I think you can't blame the center at this point. It's on coaching at this point. Like something else. I'm serious. Like that, something has to change there. It's been a problem for them literally every game. It's why there was 4th and 31 in the Iron Bowl because of a bad snap there. Yeah, I don't understand it. It is the way it is. Ironically enough, he did not do that much against Georgia. Alabama played the game of their life, apparently, against Georgia, then proceeded to just melt down against Michigan. So, yeah, frustrating for me as a Georgia fan, I guess. But, yeah, it is what it is with the snaps. That's been a problem for them all year.
You mentioned one other thing. Sorry. I keep finding one more thing to talk about in this game.
Mm-hmm.
The coaching, it did – we're not really used – for most of the Saban tenure, we're not used to him being like his staff being clearly outcoached. But Michigan very clearly has better coordinators than Alabama does right now. And I would say just a better coaching staff in general. Their defensive line coach, Mike Elston, he's basically the reason that Notre Dame went to 2 playoffs is with the defensive lines he had there. And then he went over to Michigan a few years ago, and man, they've been lights out. I don't know if there's a better pair of coordinators in the country than Michigan. Depends what you think of Sharon Moore, if you like his offense or not. But it's really good, and yeah, just something that I thought was an interesting thought. We think Bama has a better roster. They're 90% blue chip ratio, and Michigan is 54%.
Right,
but Michigan felt like the better team, and I think a huge part of that is coaching and development.
Michigan is able to coach past their talent deficiency so well. And I think we don't talk about that quite enough. They are nowhere near Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, and yet they consistently are beating these football teams despite not recruiting anywhere close to them. That's a tribute to coaching. You're right. I think the defensive coordinator, I'm not willing to say that much on Sharon Moore. Like, the offense has been good at times. This was not a fantastic offensive just play calling from that standpoint for Michigan. The defense, no doubt, they knew what Alabama was doing. It felt, not saying they had their sign stolen. Don't get me wrong there, but part of being a good coordinator is having a feel for what's coming and having adjustments and adjusting to what you think Alabama will adjust to. You know what I mean? Count like that whole chess game that goes on, being able to win that. So yeah, Michigan won. They did outcoach them though overall in this game. They were the more sound, better coach team.